Um, I suspect, well, is everyone okay with the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Those are approved. I think what I'm going to say we should do is, we had asked Brody, or Brody had volunteered, to give us an update on the land use plan. Tonight, just to do a reset after the holidays and where we are on this. We didn't have it positioned as an action item or decision item tonight. Really, Brody had sent out a concept that I think he wanted to share with us, that addressed the Heights specifically. And so what I'm going to have Brody do is give us an update. Then we can ask for a few comments, but I don't think we're making any decisions tonight. We have a long agenda with a lot of other stuff on it, so we want to get back in focus. Where are we? And then the hope is to get this concluded over the next couple months. So that's been, Brody. Maybe you can lead off with where we do stand with the land use plan as a whole, if you want to, or specifically with respect to the Heights.
Yeah, I think it's probably appropriate to touch on both. So the land use plan is in what the consultants consider to be its final draft. Some of the last edits were kind of the typos and the cleaning up of the existing document. Unfortunately, we haven't spent a lot of time in the other chapters of that particular report. So as we start to hopefully narrow down what the end result of the Heights study area will be, we can begin to comb through the other pages to see if there's any substantive changes that we'd like to see in that report. But I don't know if it's just a product of being hyper-focused on the Heights that we haven't given the attention that we need to the other portions of it, or if it's we haven't done that because it's generally acceptable to us. So, or perhaps a little bit of both. So I guess with that being said, the consultants are kind of anxiously waiting to see how they can get the Perrysburg Heights portion of that plan in a condition where we feel like it's in a final draft where we can go through the entire document then with a kind of a fine-tooth comb and make sure it produces the results that we're looking for. So I guess with that in mind, I think where we left off last time is there was some discussion about the Perrysburg Heights scenario. There were some explanations that were provided. Since that time, there's been some personal meetings that have occurred. I attended a meeting with Leah, Mark Weber. We had a sit-down meeting with Joe Schaller from Perrysburg Township, and really tried to make sure that, if nothing else, that the communication was in place. And I think we've made some steps with that. Leah has consulted with me on some information that she's shared with us, kind of some of her constituents. We've also met with Paul Balazs. I'm not sure, how much of that Paul has shared because it was more of a one-on-one conversation that we've had, but I've brought him into the loop. And as a result of that, I came up and kind of crafted a map that I thought started to perhaps address some of the concerns that we were hearing from the folks that live in that area, while also keeping in mind that the city has kind of an established goal, you could say, of creating a commercial corridor along State Route 25. So the impossible task is, how do you blend these two wants and needs? So what I've provided to you in the last page of your packet this evening is a color-coded map. And what I want to do is walk through and just provide a brief explanation as to the thought that went into this. It's not just as simple as throwing some color on a map, but there's some things that you may not initially notice from this map. So I'll kind of walk you through what some of those are. As you can see here, along the left-hand side of that, on State Route 25, there are currently 8 points of access into Perrysburg Heights. Some of them are fully signalized access points. Some of those are sort of right in, right out. Other ones are full access without lights. So the proposal that I have here would indicate that the green diamonds would remain access both in and out of Perrysburg Heights. So that's roughly 4 of the 8. The red diamonds would be areas where access to State Route 25 would be disconnected from State Route 25 to Perrysburg Heights. This would force people to, and again, these alternate, so as to not get these points of access too far apart, to provide them properly spaced, because obviously a goal of ODOT is to provide fewer access points onto major roadways for safety and just overall organization. The idea behind the blue road that runs north and south is that becomes more of a kind of a throughway or a collector. So if you're familiar with the area over off of Route 20 that bridges Kroger over to Sherwin-Williams, over to Taco Bell, ultimately over Chick-fil-A and Lowe's. That's kind of a secondary parallel road that allows you to avoid the main road. That's kind of the thought process here. Whether that is coming from Roachton Road, heading up to some of these commercial, it doesn't require people to go through the lights at Roachton Road and 25 or the series of lights that will exist along in the area here across from Levis Commons. You can avoid that by taking the access road without cutting through the neighborhood. So that's one advantage to that. The other thing that you'll notice is if you're traveling north on State Route 25, you would turn right at any one of these green diamonds. This would be the point where access is maintained. You would turn right, so you'd be headed east. You would not be able to enter the residential portion of Perrysburg Heights because you would be greeted here by what's shown as kind of an olive green color, which is a landscape buffer. That would force you, it would keep headlights down, it would force you to come up, make a stop, and take a left to access a business or take a right to access a business. If you did need to access Perrysburg Heights community, it wouldn't be a straight through shot where traffic is likely to be speeding or cutting through, because you'd have to make a jog either to the left or the right to access one of the opening points shown in that kind of olive green color. So that was very intentional in that regard. The other thing that's probably most important about this entire map is the specific location of the vertical north and south blue road, that access road that I was talking about. If you look underneath the kind of the tan section here, you will see, it's a little hard to see on the maps, but it's actually a diagonally hashed line. It's shown on the map. It kind of shows up as maybe a little darker tan, but it's actually a hashed line. That is the current corporate boundaries of the city. The exception, there are kind of two exceptions to that. The area, the tan rectangle that says Taco Bell on it, if you look in the bottom right corner of that rectangle, you'll see there's one parcel excluded that is currently in Perrysburg Township. That parcel is finishing the title work. They're expecting to close on that property very shortly. Once they close on that to add that to the Taco Bell property, we would be looking to annex that into the city of Perrysburg. So that's not in the city yet, so this map is technically accurate, but it's in the final stages of requesting annexation into the city. So it's anticipated that parcel will close up. Additionally, if you look at, there's a little bit darker line below the third A and triple A. You see that there? Since this map, this base map was originally created, I believe in 2014, those 6 parcels, which exist right below the 3 A's, have been annexed into the city of Perrysburg. So that hashed line, in order to represent that properly, would be slid over 6 parcels and would grab that. So again, as I was saying, anything, for the most part, with the 2 exceptions I just told you, anything to the right of that hashed line is in Perrysburg Township and is zoned whatever it is in Perrysburg Township. Anything left of that line is in the city of Perrysburg and is zoned C4 highway commercial, consistent with our goals. So that brings me back to my point about why the location of that north-south blue road is important. And what I did is I positioned that roadway as far west as I could based on the existing corporate boundaries, as not to encroach any further to the east than necessary to accommodate that roadway. The idea that I have, and this is just presented as sort of a mediation idea to see if it gains any traction, but anything to the left of the blue road would be obviously fair game for not only annexation, but commercial rezoning and redevelopment or repurposing of that particular property. And the idea is that anything to the right of the vertical blue line and to the right of the green space could be listed in the land use plan as legacy residential or some other appropriate category that reflects what the folks from the Heights have been advocating for. So I think that's all I can tell you at this point.
Okay.
So, I guess my one question with this, or one main question, with this north-south roadway that's proposed, I assume this is covering households that exist currently.
It is. Yes.
So is this going to be, there's a difference between putting it in the plan for, this is what we'd like to see. Is this something that we're gonna potentially plan on creating a roadway and actively acquire property? Or, what's the intent of the north-south road as far as the city is concerned with that kind of
Yeah, and I would say that that's probably the one limitation of this plan, is that I don't necessarily have the blessing of the city administrator and the mayor and, all the folks that are involved in that process. This is looking at it as though if there weren't any hurdles to doing this.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, you could set this down and it would work, it would perform. So, but you are correct, it would require some acquisition of properties. There's some demolition costs, there's property acquisition costs. But none of that really takes hold unless you have a plan to do that. So unfortunately, I can't speak on that part necessarily, but.
I just wanted to make it clear because this is going to be the same thing if we say this were adopted and made part of the plan, the actual land use plan, we're kind of running into the same, or will be somewhat the same issues of the park that was presented, right? So I just want to make sure we're clear that it's, I guess what the intention is behind it, whether there's an actual plan that's going to be active and we're trying to follow through on, or whether it's more of a passive suggestion.
Brody, do I recall that the area along 25 is west of the blue street, or whatever you want to call it? Do these footnotes, or whatever you call them, head notes at the top, tell me that those are basically owned by two property groups?
No, that is actually, so what you're seeing there, that small print,
Yeah.
there was a survey that was completed with this property, and it listed every owner of every property in Perrysburg Heights.
Okay.
What I did is I literally cut these 11 by 17 pages apart, taped them together to create one big map that I scanned in. So what you're seeing up there is a remnant of a much larger list. So I would ignore, what does it say here,
Okay, so those,
the adjoiner text.
okay. All right, that helps.
So that doesn't have any relevance to this discussion.
But then, east of the Blue Road, you're saying that's all, that just remains as is, and we call it legacy residential? Okay.
Or you tweak it somewhat to, accommodate, smaller lots,
Mhm.
a smaller home size, perhaps some of the affordable housing elements that the mayor was looking for, and I think maybe even some of you had suggested in the past. But at the end of the day, regardless of how it's massaged, the intent would be to allow the community and its residents and things to continue essentially as it exists.
Okay, and from here, this is all news to us tonight. It's probably news to you folks. Leah and Paul may know more about this than we do necessarily. But from here, the thought is to get some comfort level around the heights and then address the rest of the plan. I think what you said earlier was correct. I think the rest of the plan, I haven't heard much about, and I don't think there'll be much, I don't think there'll be any controversy to speak of.
I don't anticipate that, but I also
I
know
think
that it hasn't gotten the same attention that this has, so I don't know that we fully flushed out every detail of that, but I don't see anything that is controversial in the remainder of that.
Okay. So it shouldn't take this long to finalize the rest of that. Now, we do want to take time for at least a few comments tonight. As I said, we get a lot of other fascinating stuff you might want to stay around for. Conex boxes, and good God, I don't know what else. But Leah, Paul, do you want to offer any thoughts, or you want to just digest this for a while and we'll come back for a final set two on this? I'll leave it up to the two of you or others if you want to react to this plan at all, or this concept, and you can do that now or at a later date. It's up to you.
I'm not sure about Leah. I have lots of thoughts, but I'm just still in the formation stage, and I haven't had a chance to hear from, more importantly, I haven't had a chance to hear what residents think about this because it hasn't been distributed as I mentioned previously.
Yeah.
So, I don't have any comments to make on that.
Leah, did you
I do
want to
have-
offer anything?
Yeah, I think we need to commence as a community and have that discussion, especially those that this could potentially affect. I do have some questions that I feel that I would like answered.
Well, maybe, do you want to come up to the podium, and then if you're comfortable doing it, you can, if you're up at the podium, you can pull the mask down, or leave it on, whichever you prefer.
I just have a few questions about the road that runs north and south. And when you had mentioned the word acquire property, would that mean then that I know as a landowner you have full rights to sell your property, and then at that point, I'm assuming selling of that property would turn that into a commercial now lots or however it's going to be rezoned on. My question is for the people who sell that, are you saying that regardless of sale, meaning arm's length or non-arm's length transactions, would that then turn into commercial? And if that's the case, then also what does that mean then when you have an access point that runs north and south and is used for traffic? Does that not mean by due process that eminent domain could potentially be put into place?
I'll try to answer your second question first. I think that's probably the easier one to answer. Public roadway improvements are eligible for eminent domain. I think that's perhaps the question that
Just clarify, because I feel like eminent domain verbiage is important to use, so that way it's something that we can further discuss with residents. We need to make sure that they fully understand what that means, and I think every one of you would agree with that.
And I think, because I think you had the same questions that I did, and I wanted to stay away from the word eminent domain because I don't want to give the wrong impression, because I think everyone hears last thing they want to use is eminent domain.
Correct.
And I want to make sure that's not lost in translation. I don't think the city has any desire to take property from people in the Heights. That's why I was asking whether it's going to be followed up with an action plan or not.
Right, and that's exactly why I'm saying that whether we want to use it or not, how harsh of a word it is, society-wise, we got to have tough conversations. And unfortunately, that is what it's defined at. And so we really need to use the appropriate verbiage, but it is up to us as citizens to make sure that we are relaying that information so that way we don't have that negative feedback or understanding of that. And I feel that we can do that. We just need to be very upfront and transparent of how that is relayed to residents. So then, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine. So what you're asking is a fair question. As I pointed out, I don't necessarily have the support for this plan from
Right.
any city administration. This is simply me sitting down at my desk and saying, how can I solve a conversational problem?
Right.
Not the practical problem of whether we build it, how we build it, when we build it. So I can't fully answer that question. But
Okay.
generally speaking, public roadway improvements like that are eligible for eminent domain.
Okay.
Whether the city would ever choose to support this plan or execute the plan, that's kind of part two of that, I guess.
Okay.
And then refresh me on your first part of your
The
question.
first question would be that basically if, how property is required, would that then determine how the zoning would take place, meaning if it's an arm's length transaction versus a non-arm's length transaction?
So I would say that traditionally the way that land use plans would work is that it wouldn't need to necessarily require a transaction at all. So it doesn't distinguish between an arm's length and a person-to-person transaction.
Okay.
What we typically see in land use plans like this would be at the conclusion of that plan, a land use plan is adopted, the city would go through and proactively rezone areas. So for example, we'll say the folks that live behind Scramble and Marie's, as shown in this map here, it'd be in the tan behind Scramble and Marie's. If there was universal support for the plan, the land use plan in general, the city, and again, I'm speaking about what most cities would do, not necessarily what we will do.
Okay.
Most cities would go through and say, land use plan identifies these as commercial uses. We're going to rezone those, even though there's people living there now. They're fully allowed to live there, continue to live there unimpeded. The city would go through and rezone that to a commercial use. So that if that use ever transitioned, the stage is already set for that to be allowed to be commercial.
So then that would mean that if the current owner that lives there, which is currently in this, two of them actually are here right now that live behind Scramble and Maurice and behind AAA, or three people actually. You have then, okay, so then for me, and I'm thinking from a lending perspective, because if we're talking about affordable housing, there's different programs and things that go into that. And I can tell you that I review appraisals as my job, and highest and best use and zoning are key things to some of those programs. And a lot of the programs that would fall into the affordable housing would not allow that.
So-
FHA, USDA, bond loans.
And I think I get what you're getting at too. I will tell you this is something I would want to more fully research, but just off the top of my head, I think what you're talking about is if we change it to a commercial zoning, like what he's saying is still true. You can still use it as a residential.
So it would be
And,
grandfathered.
yeah, usually that grandfather provision is
Yep.
going to carry through
Correct.
until the structure needs to be replaced.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be, so you would even be able to pass it on to your descendants.
Correct.
You may even be able to sell the house.
Right.
But as soon as there's something structural
Right.
that changes the original framework that was there, then the commercial is going to kick in, and the zoning would be, hey, you got to do something
So-
commercial with this rather than residential.
Correct, and the reason why I wanted that statement to be said was because, so then grandfathering in would be then, if the house were to be burnt down, it would not be able to be reestablished as residential.
I think that
That's
would,
exactly what I wanted to hear. Okay,
but I think that we have our law director here who got my attention. She might.
I just wanted to make clear that the only thing the city of Perrysburg owns is property that's in the city of Perrysburg.
Right, yeah,
So
which this is still township.
all of the property that is in the township is still just a plan and a discussion. We don't have the ability to rezone township property. We can put what we would have it zoned as if we were to annex the property. If the property owner were to come to us and say, please annex it, we can put on our map, we would want this zoned as commercial. Absolutely. But we don't have the power to tell the city, the township, they have to rezone property that's not annexed into the state.
okay, so,
So what she's saying is we're putting the cart before the horse.
and I completely understand that, and,
But
I
that's
get-
what a land use plan is. It's just a plan for if A happens, then B happens, then C happens.
And from my standpoint, I completely understand that. I get the whole point of the plan. I'm fully competent of that. My thing is this, is I want it to be said, to be heard from the people that are sitting here, that would potentially affect if that were to happen. Because within the conversation that we had on November 15th, there was comments made that there is push from Worth County commissioners that if we do not annex, if the city of Perrysburg is not annexed, if the city of Perrysburg can no longer annex anything else until they annex the house.
So I annexed the property last year and that was not in any way expressed to me.
Okay, because I have that on an audio from one of the people that were at that lunch.
I can say that I've had many meetings with the Wood County Commissioners since I've been here for 9 years, and that has never come up as a topic of conversation.
And I'm glad that he cleared that up, because I have sent an email to them to ask them if that was a correct comment to be made.
Maybe it was 30 years ago, I can't testify to that, but in the last 9 years, that's not been a conversation I've had with the county commissioners at a monthly luncheon.
And Leah and Bridget, the one thing that I'm the person that said that at that last meeting. When John Alexander was here, when we were going through annexations with Matthew Barreto, I don't know what the composition of the Wood County Commissioners was back then. They did question us on at least 3 annexation proposals that we brought forward on the west side of town, out in the area of Carrington Woods in the sanctuary. They did push back and say, why do you continuously ignore Perrysburg Heights? they said there may come a point in the future where if you don't look to annex this, we may not approve the areas on the west side of town that the city was doing that. So again, that was,
And the composition of the commission has changed dramatically since that point in time.
I appreciate you for clearing that up.
And he needs to have it since then, so it's pretty well understood his position on being annexed.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that that's clear, because I know that the people have that many had questions that are not currently here right now, so I want to make sure that we are addressing this as well.
But I just wanted to make sure that, you know, when you speak of affordable housing, and my stance is this, while I understand that this is a plan with the city, I have also relayed, and I'm sure Mark and Brody can attest, that I told Joe specifically at that meeting that I will be there at the township at some point with an understanding that they are our elected officials and they need to have their feet held to the fire for stuff that we also want to see as residents because we are under their jurisdiction. So I know that this here needs to be addressed, but we also need to, as a community, start to look to those elected officials to make sure that they understand that we want them to provide us with the same protections and to not just look at us as like the redheaded stepchild. And I'm allowed to say that because Joe specifically stated at that meeting that, well, we're just waiting for Perrysburg to take you over. And for us to hear that, I told him directly to his face that it is disappointing to hear, as I am a voter in that township. You do not pretty much just say, that's why we leave you to the side. Do I believe that's his character? No, but I think us as residents haven't done what we need to do within our own jurisdiction. So I get that this is a plan and we need to be cognizant of that, but we also too as residents need to make sure we're doing our part with our own jurisdiction. So I just want to make sure that everybody here understood what those things mean and get clarity and make sure that you guys understand too, like why I'm trying to say it. You caught on very quickly, so I just want to make sure that we are having that conversation for if A and B and C roll. All right, that's all I have.
the one thing I did want to clarify is when I talked about what cities mostly would typically do after a land use plan is we would rezone land, you know, if any portion of this land here was zoned residential in the city and our plan identified as commercial, we would go through the conclusion of that process and rezone it residential. But as some folks pointed out here, we're not going to go in and we can't rezone property in the Perrysburg Township. But what it does is it provides you advance notice, documentation, a visual image that says, if we're asked to incorporate these parcels into the city, this clearly spells out our intent of zoning those commercial at that time.
Okay.
So it might have been a little confusing what I was saying to you before. We wouldn't rezone Perrysburg Township properties, but
right.
we'd certainly outline that as a visual expectation that when we're asked, this will be our answer.
And a lot of that conversation we had, like I said, I just want to make sure that there's clarity for everybody, because I can say something and it's like the game of telephone. How many times have you played that where by the time it ends with the last person, the message is never the same? It may be similar, but it's never the same. So now that there's plenty of us here to be able to make sure we're all hearing the same thing, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, was the clarity based on those questions that I just asked.
Yep, thank you.
One thing I will say about this roadway, not to drag this out any longer, but I think it's really important, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brody, but I really like the intent behind what the roadway is to create that stopping point for commercial intrusion. So it's going to kind of create a barrier as far as, all right, this is where the commercial property, there's going to be a roadway, and then there's going to be a nice green stretch so that there's a cognizable plan. It makes it flow with the city's plan. And again, it's just a plan, but that's one aspect I like, and obviously I'm curious to hear how it's received in the Heights community as well. And whoever conducts that meeting, I would love to be an observer of that meeting, not necessarily a participant, so that I have more context when we have our next planning and zoning. So if you want to let if you want to shoot an email about when and where that is. I would love to be a passive observer. I don't really want to be asked questions, but just so I can take in what the conversation's like.
Well, that, I understood that, Leah. You were talking about going to a township trustees meeting.
Yes,
That's
yes,
okay.
correct.
I've been doing this for, 34 years now. I think it's the first time I heard anyone from the Heights say, hey, we need to go to the township and talk to them too, and say that they need to pay attention to us as well. And maybe that's happened, and I've not been aware of it. Maybe the leadership of the Heights Center has dialogued with them. Well, you've gotten financial support with them over the years at times. But I'm not saying, forget about it. We're not going to deal with it either, that it's just their job. But I think, and I know Corey raised this last time, and you picked up on it right away. I think that's a good development. Because this is an area where it's a transition area, and the thing you said tonight, I didn't pick up on that last meeting. I had never heard that the Wood County Commissioners in some way were pressuring us to annex the Heights. But those exchanges you said, Brody, with John Alexander, that just never needed to be brought to our attention. That was news to me as well, but it's certainly not the current thinking.
And that's why I said it needs opportunity for all of us to be able to have that full understanding.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that but you're right, we do need to start working with the township. And I don't think that it's because our community doesn't know that. I think it just takes one of us to realize and to learn how to connect those dots to make sure that we're doing what we need to as citizens and holding those accountable, because I know that if you came through my doors for anything, you would hold me accountable to providing you the best service. So that is what we should do, especially with elected officials.
Point well taken. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add, new or different about that particular piece? Yes,
There's
sir.
a question of clarification on this map.
Sure.
Could you, for someone who's kind of new to this, I see the plots, how many residential homes would represent the left of that county buffer? Do you have a rough estimate? Current residential?
Are you talking about east of the roadway or west of the roadway?
West of the buffer. So that tan or that orange area, I just wondered how many residential homes are in that particular section of the map that you're responding?
About 30.
About 30 or
It would
so.
take away 30.
Yeah, I don't have the answer, but it sounds like Paul has confidence that there is the answer. Not every parcel has a home on it. Sometimes there's, homestead that'll have 3 or 4 parcels. So I didn't do an aerial photo analysis to come up with those numbers.
Any other points? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I have a comment, I guess. I mean, my thing is, why are they pushing for a straight line where I don't see the need for it? I see that Route 25 is all commercial as it is, and there's not an issue with that. But when you start trying to take over people's properties just to make this perfect line, and you're going to be displacing people, basically, I don't get the purpose behind that. I know that you had mentioned before that you had talked to some owners and they were willing to sell. I don't know how many people you actually spoke to, but I know that there is a hearing impaired guy that lives in that area, and I would love to know who spoke to him about what this plan is. And I know that my mother lives in that area. I live next door to her, which it would affect my home. It's across the street from us. It would affect his home, and nobody's ever once come to my door and said, listen, we're looking to do this and your home is going to be affected. What's your idea? What are your thoughts? It's like a slap in the face. I mean, you know, I work hard for everything that I have. My kids were raised in the Heights. We moved to the Heights since I was 3 years old. I'm 55 now. And to feel like my house is not good enough for Perrysburg, or my house is not good enough. I mean, it's my home. It's all that I own, you know? And for somebody to come and just, you know, say, well, we want to make it commercial. Well, you know what? It was never commercial before. When we moved there, it was all country out there. And we made it a home. You know, my grandkids are there now. And I hope to pass, you know, my house on to them. And you just can't, it's like you're just taking away, you know, something that means so much to someone. It may not mean anything to you, because you're going to be making millions of dollars from this, you know. The city of Perrysburg is going to be getting rich off of this. But what about the people who, you know, my house, if they buy my house, they're not going to give me enough money so that I can go purchase a house and not have to worry about my house is paid off. I'm not going to be able to go and purchase a house to where I'm not going to have a mortgage. You know, I almost feel like I'm going to be homeless because, you know, you guys are throwing a wrench in something that I've worked my butt off, you know, to get. I lost my husband in 2004, and I fought to keep that house because there was so much red tape around when he passed away. And I managed to get, you know, the things that I needed to save my house. And I'm not going to let, you know, a bunch of strangers come and decide, well, we want to take over this property and we want a nice straight line. I'm not just going to give it up. I mean,
Yeah, let me take a stand at that, Brody, and then you can follow up, because I think some of this confusion arises from the fact that this isn't the city's plan of development.
Right.
I mean, it's a plan, a vision that goes out 10 or 20 years and says this is where we think it's going to go. Now, the city's not going to come in. You know, we didn't build Scrambler Marines or Great Lakes Urgent Care. We didn't do that. It's a question of whether the potential developers come in and say to you,
well,
you know, we'd like to put something in here and we'd like to buy your house and your mom's house. And we'll pay you, I don't know, whatever. But I think the misperception is that once we do this, we're going to aggressively get out there and pursue commercial development. That's not the way the process works. That's for the private sector. The private sector consists of commercial developers, residential developers, and property owners. That's where they collaborate and they say, hey, you know, we think we've got a really good use. If it's for the land where your house is, okay. If they got a concept for it, they got to come to you and say, is it worth it to you? And you may say no.
right.
I've lived here for 55 years.
That's what I think I'm doing. Like, you guys keep throwing this at us, and we just want to be left alone.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, is that too much to ask? I mean, I'm not going to your house and saying, look, I want to put a strip club where you live, you know?
Yeah, and I think,
I just-
so if I could turn the perspective on that, it's not that we want to do any of that. So if you look at the way the Heights were 20 years ago, were any of those businesses there?
No.
Okay, and that was without any protection from the city, right? Those businesses come to the city and say, hey, we want to build and we want to annex in, will you accept us commercially?
And I'm
So
fine
what you
with
see
that.
is this jagged line.
Right, and
So,
I'm fine with that.
yeah, and when I see this straight line, it's everybody that's in this tan and part of the blue and part of that proposed green space plan is still going to unaffected. All right, it's still going to be status quo. You may be in a city plan as, hey, we'll potentially consider you commercial if you want to be annexed in, and that property owner sells, and then the commercial developer wants to submit an application to the city. We might be open to receiving that application. So everyone in the tan, blue, and the green space area, I'm not sure what color to call that, is going to be operating status quo. When I see this, what it's trying to do is the city basically saying, hey, we got your back. We want to stop this commercial intrusion so that there's still a neighborhood here that's the same character as what you guys are used
But if it does go
to.
commercial,
Huh?
but if it does go commercial, like they want it to,
Who's they?
whoever's coming up with this plan,
I think,
It-
hold on.
It's not a want to
Well, they
make it
wanna zone
commercial.
it commercial?
And I think what's getting lost is there has to be a want for you as a property owner to sell your land. As long as you don't sell your land, it won't happen. The city, and that's what they were saying, is the city has no interest in going in and saying, hey, we want to take your land and put a road here. That's not the city's perspective at all. But what we're saying is, should people start selling their land to developers, there should be something in place that protects the heights to say, hey, you're not going to annex past this point. You're not going to buy, no matter what you do, no matter who sells, buying stops at this point. And I think that's what it is. So it's not to say like no one wants to take anything that you've built over generations. And I think that was what this plan actually says. It's just don't sell your land. That's what it comes down to. Just do not sell your land. As long as you guys are on that page, or even if somebody chooses to sell it, you guys have discussions amongst as a community to say, hey, this is happening. People are selling. Developers are coming. They're obviously, and they keep coming. They're going to keep coming. Stay steadfast. Say no. Protect our community. That's the best way you can protect your community, is to say no when those developers do come. But the city is not pushing developers to you. That's absolutely not what the city does.
And the other thing that I want to add to that is you kind of focused on the straight line and how it seemed like it was just very intrusive and insulting in some ways.
it is.
The design intent with this is that it draws a very hard line, okay? That blue line and that little green line just to the right of that is, think about that as an insulator. That is the point where you won't see those commercial pressures pushing into your neighborhood. Right now, they're pushing from left to right. You've seen it.
But my
But
property is
that,
on the opposite side.
The other thing I would say is, are you from the city? Did you grow up here?
I did not.
Okay, well, I grew up in the Heights. My great-grandparents lived here, my sisters, children lived here. And the way that we have felt in comparison to the city of Perrysburg and how those residents look at us, is that they don't want to see us. They gradually put this strip of shops so that when you drive by, you don't have to look at the Heights. And now you're saying, oh, well, we'll also put some nice trees and stuff so that when you're shopping at these nice places, you won't have to look at those houses. That's what it feels like. I know that might not be your intent,
And I
but
understand
that's
that.
what it feels like, and that's what it's always felt like to live in this neighborhood.
Well, I'm sorry that's happened, and I'm sorry that that's how it's been received in the past, or maybe even my plan has been received. I think whenever you have real estate up against a major highway, that it's always going to be the highest demand for commercial uses. So I don't think, from a planning standpoint, I can't imagine somebody ever wanting to shield the Heights and saying you don't want to look at that. And the very opposite of my plan here is this green buffer in the roadway, is to keep that development from jumping across the roadway. And the landscape buffer, it could come out if you wanted it to. I don't want the residents of the Heights to have to see the back of commercial businesses. The design intent there.
My grandma's the house there by Scramble Marie's when I was growing up. That was just a field. There was a house in there.
Right.
And
But
eventually it took a little penny strip and it was a little, like a lock it up. And then that tore down and they paved the whole thing and now it's a beautiful garden and a brick wall.
And that's extremely unfortunate.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to make sure doesn't happen again, because you shouldn't have to live like that. I wouldn't want to live like that. You should have a nice transition where you don't have to see a dumpster enclosure or the plain end of a building on the back with maybe a grease trap or a fire escape ladder going up to the roof. You don't want to see that. You want to feel like you're a community that is buffered on all sides, that you're a unit that's not just stuck in the back of a commercial property. So that was the design intent there. So I apologize if it seems like was trying to shield you from some, or other people from you. It was actually reverse that. It was trying to provide a better experience for the folks that may live in that area. They're not having to hear the cars, see the headlights, coming down the roadways, seeing, a dumpster enclosure out back or something like that, because no one wants to live next to that.
Cody, the blue line, the idea is that anything from, on the east side of the blue line would be clearly defined by the city plan about when it's a commercial development. That's the idea, right?
That is my proposal.
That's the intent. And would it be fair to say that that blue line followed the existing boundary lines of the city township property lines? And the city said, as part of its plan, that nothing east of that blue line is going to be considered for commercial development, that it would have the same level of protection.
So you're saying
And
that?
wouldn't that prevent the possibility that commercial properties would start growing up around her house, making it increasingly unpleasant for her? And wouldn't it prevent the possibility that she would even have to say no to any developer that tried to sweep up her land?
Well, and that's where I
And
said,
one more question. If anybody in Perrysburg Heights said that they would like to see a collector road going through the center of the community.
well, I think what people need to understand is this is not a selfish interest at all. The roadway is designed to achieve several goals. Safety along State Route 25 by limiting the points of access. I also heard through conversations that people speed down through the heights to cut through the commercial area. So I thought, okay, great, we've got a cut through problem. I think you might have actually.
You know where they speed down though? They speed down north to south, not east to west.
Correct.
All of the cut through traffic
Correct.
with the high speed.
But they're
north to
doing-
south. That collector road doesn't do anything to change that.
I would respectfully disagree with that. It removes.
If you go by there, you'll see those semis fly down there, right in front of the.
Correct, and I don't think anything that we can do is going to prevent that. But it doesn't do it through the middle of a neighborhood now. It does that with commercial on one side, down a street that's specifically designed and intended to allow them to do that, with a buffer on the other side. So it's gonna happen. People are gonna speed, people are gonna take the shortest distance they can to wherever they wanna go. Completely understand that. My plan tried to acknowledge the fact that they're doing that and are likely going to continue to do that. I'm just providing a space for them to do that, so they're not doing it down the roadways that are right next to your homes.
But the collector road is not anything that anybody from the Perrysburg Heights neighborhood has indicated they consider to be important.
And I did not make that claim that it
And I
did.
think it would be reasonable to find out whether there's anybody that thinks it is important in that community,
Well,
or whether there are other ways to achieve the same objective.
well, I think what you need to understand, Paul, is that I'm playing a weird dual role in this, okay? I'm in a strange mediation spot here. I'm trying to put my planner hat on and deal with logistics of traffic and safety and economic development and design, city planning. And I'm also trying to be sensitive to where the residential community wants to go in the future. You want to be preserved. I'm not saying that this plan preserves the community 100%. It doesn't. I think I've generally referred to this as you lose 5% to retain the other 95%. So this is not a painless design for Perrysburg Heights. I've never claimed that. But I think in many ways it's more advantageous to you than maybe the first proposal. And it also achieves the limited goals that the city has designed throughout its plans for many, many years.
I think the thing is, why do we have to lose 5% of our neighborhood? Why?
Well,
Because
because
if you could just leave it the way it is, you have commercial property up there already, just leave it alone. You're causing, even that road is coming, how many properties down that street? So what's gonna happen with those people? If some people wanna sell on the first 2 blocks and not the third or fourth, or just to make a half a road, I mean, you gotta cut down through there's properties on that line that you're proposing.
well,
So what happens to those people home?
well, I think the fair and reasonable answer to this is we're going to have people with different opinions across the board. We clearly have a group that says leave it as it is, do nothing with it. We've had a fairly aggressive plan that addressed the entire Perrysburg Heights community with open space, reimagined housing and zoning standards. And then we have perhaps what I'll refer to somewhere in the middle, a plan that tries to achieve the limited objectives of the city while maintaining the balance of Perrysburg Heights. At the end of the day, it's a fair question about why can't it just stay exactly the way it is. It can. I don't make that decision. We have 3 options on the table, and through discussions, communications like this, that's how it will be determined what, if anything, happens.
I think I was asked one time by somebody that people are getting emails and phone calls, like, they think that they're gonna take us out of our homes and stuff, like, how do I count? The best way to say, just stop, no more plans, no more, the first one, this one, the next one, and they're saying that maybe 20, 30, that's just, it's just gonna give us another 20, 30 years to come back to the same thing again.
Not necessarily.
And that's what it seems like that.
Okay, so like, this is,
Like,
What-
this is the thing, the point is this, if you just say no right now, just leave it alone, that's it. Don't come back to this at all. There's no plan, so nobody will think that. If you guys don't want nobody's email, no phone calls, just leave it alone. And say, no, we're not going forward with this at all, and that'll stop everything.
so, and what's hard on this side of things, let me just put it in perspective, is there's been no plan, and what we have is a commercial dumpster next to a beautiful garden. And that's the stuff that happens with no plan. So it's, if there's no plan, what's the line for commercial development? When's the city supposed to say no? Wouldn't you like to know when the city's gonna say no?
This is the thing, no right now, leave it alone. There's,
Okay, and
whatever's there already, we're dealing with right now.
and I hear you saying that, but what about your neighbor that is right next to the AAA?
That's me.
But yeah, and this is, and good for you.
Right here.
Like,
We done been off almost already.
So-
We don't want nothing.
What-
You know what you can do? You can block off Broad and Roasted. So we don't get no traffic going through there. Just cut it off like how you do Finley, right, this road that you did by the railroad tracks. Remember how you could cut through to get to River Road, to Finley Road? You put little rails there, so people would go through the neighborhood, right here,
Okay,
couple streets down.
It- it-
Remember
this is-
that? Remember that?
But that's in the township.
that's in the township, so this is,
No,
that's,
that's right here in Perry.
I know, but we're not,
I know, I'm talking about Perrysburg Township, Roasting Broad Street, put a rail there, so no one can cut through, like everybody does now.
and you understand that we're,
Do apex. And put speed bumps right there. So if they want to cut through there, they can cut through there, go to the other side.
Well, we're off on a different topic.
Yeah.
We have to go with the township to have a discussion. So let them finish.
But I did want to address what this gentleman said. If you do nothing, you know what you're going to have? You're going to have continued commercial encroachment on a piece-by-piece basis, and you're going to have 3 and 4 and 5, 6 more messes next door to some of your neighbors who still live there. So you can either ignore it all, pull the covers up over our head, and we'll just have a mess out there that isn't going to be good for anyone who's left in the Heights or on the other side either. So I think what we're just trying to do is say, okay, look, we know there's going to be interest in commercial development along a major highway with a lot of traffic. We know there is. Let's just see how we can best manage that so it works for the commercial uses and does as much as it can to preserve the integrity of the Heights.
So why would you worry about the commercial, potentially commercial businesses? So what about all the people that live on that street?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear
If
everything.
you're gonna build a street there, that's literally getting somebody's home. So if they don't want to sell, you can't make your road. But you're worried more about a potential commercial property rather than the actual residents that live there.
Well,
That doesn't make sense.
we didn't sell the properties that turned commercial. Residents.
I'm saying that your future plan right here is to put a road in between it. Those would be homes that people live in.
Mhm.
But what if they don't want to sell?
Well, then it won't happen that way.
So then why make the plan?
Well,
Because I think you're going to, the park or the park before the horse. I don't, I just don't understand why it just can't be left alone. We have commercial properties, we're dealing with what we have right now. If you say that there's no more zoning for commercial properties, that's it, then that's it. Then you will never have a problem. And with the problems that we've been dealing with already with this, we can handle that. And that's all I'm saying.
Yep, understood.
So you're gonna see a brother and sister.
All right, I think what we need to do, Brody, is we will be meeting more quickly than usual because they're changing schedule. At some point, you're right, your comment earlier was correct, different people have different opinions and not everyone may necessarily walk away satisfied, but we need to make some decision on where to go with this and move along. Now, I don't know if we're looking to do that at the, see, because we meet again in like two or 3 weeks,
February 2nd, I believe.
February 2nd, wherever that falls.
Or
Or,
wait till the next time to come back with something to you guys. We can be in contact before that, but can we not do 2 weeks? I just don't think that, I'm just gonna be honest, I just don't think that we are gonna be able to relay correctly scope and meaning with every possibility of that emotion, understanding. We have to go through the emotion first and let us get to the understanding and then let us get to the point where we are, where we can be having a conversation, if that is at all possible.
well, I think that's very reasonable.
Yep.
I wanted to create a structure where you can tell all your folks, look, this is it, this is the meeting where a decision is going to be made. I hate for you to keep dragging out at meetings where we're not making a decision. But this is helpful, it's productive. I mean, I think we're a lot better spot than we were 3 months ago. But I suspect you don't want to keep coming here every month for the next year.
I won't, but I'll come on my own accord to understand other things, but yes, I do want to. I just don't think that people are ready yet. And we have to get through the emotions first. So let us focus on that, and then let us focus on the task at hand, and then in between there, I can update with you, or whoever else to talk and update with you. You know what I mean? Or Anita, Stephanie, somebody can update with you guys. But when we have that conversation, I will tell you that yes, you're welcome to come. I would encourage it.
Yeah, I would love to observe it so I can.
You can see then what it is that's trying to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, so then the tentative concept would be we'll wrap this up at the March meeting, first Wednesday in March. It gives one time to think and talk and consider. And
We still gonna have it on the February agenda with an understanding no decision's gonna be made, or maybe we.
I don't want it on the agenda because then
Okay.
it leaves them in a position where they got to come to the meeting and.
Well,
You know.
should we discuss other factors of the land?
I don't
know if there's other things we need to discuss, but.
I think we can hold it till March.
Okay.
So that'll be the plan, the first Wednesday in March, whatever that date is. We'll try and conclude this, hopefully on a mutually satisfactory basis, or as close to that as we can get. All right. All you folks are certainly welcome to stay, but you're also free to go. You don't want to hear about all the other minutiae we got to deal with.
Are there any plans for that Caterpillar on 25?
Yeah, isn't that what ProMedica is gonna?
Yes, if, I'll grab you a card, I can email you over what they're planning, or I can have a discussion with you as to what they're wanting to do. They're not really wanting to rebuild, just repurpose the building and add some landscaping, make it
And I
look
know
nicer.
that, your focus is on commercial property, and
Yeah,
I
actually,
don't understand why bringing more businesses into the Heights is gonna be effective, because we have Levis Commons, and there's like 13 businesses that have gone out of business in there. So,
And let me phrase it this way. I'm not focused on commercial stuff. We're basically focused on city planning when we're looking at this. And there happens to be commercial development happening because of 25. That's why we're having that
well,
conversation.
that's why I'm saying.
Yeah.
The businesses there.
So, and I have no idea whether someone wants, it might be
we're not
cheaper
building-
to
That's what he.
build in the Heights than it is at Levis Commons or rent. I have no idea why there's empty buildings and people are choosing to build, no idea, but.
If you guys want to follow me in, I can show you what they're doing. That's,
All right. Speaking of taking forever to do some hedges and screens, Kate,
Yeah, no.
what are we, about a year and a quarter in?
This is well over a year, I
This
think.
predates you, Cory. I mean, I think this stuff.
The notices for arborvitae went out before I was on council. Because I remember it was one of the first issues, and I was like,
We're here today to discuss the death of big bushy trees and my unending hope that this might be resolved. Councilman Coleman asked us to look at the zoning and consider, I think it was Councilman Coleman, having zoning for arborvitae in most areas of the city that were not front yards. I originally put together a chart with that. It went to Planning Commission. Planning Commission was confused by having hedges and fences in the same chart and thought it might be clearer if we separated them. So what is before you is the chart that is exactly as it was before for fences, fence walls and screens, exactly what we have in the code. And then a second chart that would be for hedges and plantings. And all I did was follow through whatever essential letter was already in existence for fences. So if you could have a 6 or 8 foot or taller fence in a rear yard, then I continued that on for hedges, that you could go up to 8 feet. The one place where it stops is in OS. They don't allow fences beyond 6 feet. They don't allow 8 foot fences, so that I didn't allow it greater than 8 feet for hedges either. So this is really just a chart that says you can have these hedges in backyards and side yards in most zones, and we get that hedges grow to more than 8 feet, so we're not going to make you come out with a ruler and chop them off.
Nope, I think it's, I looked at it today to see, because I remember we were having some trouble with our letters and our asterisks, and there's confusion around this. I think it gets it. Now, the only question I had, Kate, is on where you got the existing fences, walls, screens. Now, I know you can have structural screens, and are you pretty happy that we've got a clear line of demarcation between what a screen is on chart 1 and hedges and plantings in chart 2?
I believe that it is clear that chart 2 is things that grow naturally and chart 1 is man-made.
Okay.
But I could put that as a subtitle of natural fences versus man-made fences, I suppose, or not man-made, that's probably not correct anymore. Person-made.
Word screens. That's confusing.
What's that?
So just simply deleting the word screen, if that's.
Yeah.
There should be a comma after fences. It should say fences, comma, walls,
Oh, yeah.
comma, screens.
See, because if you go up to the, I guess it's the 1 second, third, fourth paragraph, it says fences, walls, structural screens, hedges, and screen plantings shall include all structures, you know, and then it gets kind of murky. What's what?
I would think we would take away hedges and screen plantings from that language.
You see where I am, Kate, in that fourth paragraph in the existing language?
Fences, posts shall not exceed the maximum or the all fences or screens within, wait.
No.
Next one?
It's
1250.42.
A,
Uh-huh.
fourth paragraph, it says fences, walls, structural
I
screens.
see that, hedges and screen plantings shall include all structures, shrubs, plantings. I guess what we should do is separate that into,
I think why that's relevant is because the let's say, shrubs, plantings, and that sort of thing, if they're in the middle of your backyard, singular items,
We don't care.
those are not the fence. So I think A actually addresses, sets the stage for both charts. So that structural or screens and that sort of thing that are actually used to demarcate boundaries are subject to these rules. And then it directs you to one of the charts. The thing that I think is actually confusing is somebody, even for me, who's been here for 14 years, somebody says, what's a structural screen? I don't know what a structural screen is. I've seen fences, walls, and bushes. I don't know what a structural screen is. So I have a hard time, and I think that's where the original confusion is fences, walls, and screens. Some people could think a screen is a row of arborvitae because you're screening something.
Yeah, they very well could.
It's not really intended to be that. I think that's a remnant that's in that man-made category that perhaps is no longer relevant.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it needs some more attention though, because if I read this right now, I'm a property owner, and I mean, all these fences, walls, structural screens, hedges, screen, blah, 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 to separate, enclose, screen, or demarcate a boundary.
Correct.
When we use screens on the first table, the property owner might say, well, this is a green screen, a natural growth screen, if you will, so, and it does demarcate a boundary. So do I go to first chart or second chart?
So I think what we should do is on the second chart, we should put hedges, comma, plantings, comma, screen plantings. And then I think it's clear that the first chart is screens, whatever anybody thinks that is. For me, I think that's a trellis.
You think what?
I think it's a trellis. Like, that's what I think when I hear a screen is, those things that like vines climb up? That's what I mentally see when somebody says they put up a screen.
But those are not technically demarcating a boundary.
I feel like you should just get rid of that entire paragraph. I think the charts cover it, because the preceding sentence kind of covers what we wanted to cover, and this kind of, the next sentence murkies the waters. I think if you just got rid of that sentence, you might be all right.
I tend to agree with that. And the sentence above that where it says structural screen, I still can't tell you what a structural screen is.
Right.
So you want to take out structural screen, and you want to take out,
That next sentence, that
Okay.
ends in demarcate a boundary.
And it would just be an understood policy that these things only apply to things that are acting as linear boundaries, and it doesn't
What
apply
if-
to an arborvitae.
Yeah, if you want to put demarcate.
I was going to say, what if in that first sentence, it ends with used for
Used to
used to demarcate a boundary?
To separate or demarcate a boundary.
Because then I think you still have the definition you're going for, and then you get rid of that.
All right.
And then Brody, as far as enforcement, is this chart pretty easy? Is this addressing the issue we had that originally brought us here, which was the,
No, that's a good question.
or are there still existing ones that are going to be subject to removal?
I would say that the issue that we were having is on the second chart. The R1 through R5 column, the row I'll call it, would be in the side yard of more than 8 feet and in the rear yard more than 8 feet. And this particular chart makes that permitted for 8 feet or more. So in some ways, yes, it resolves the issue of people being non-compliant with their plantings. Keep in mind that there were people who came in that said, I don't think my neighbor should be allowed to have. So
Right, I meant as far as.
we're fixing one issue and not satisfying some other folks.
We have to make someone else upset.
That's,
As far as the notices we sent out, those properties will not be compliant, I guess is the way I should. Okay.
assuming
Okay,
that
so with the
they're all side yard or
changes,
rear yard issues.
with the changes that we just talked about, are we taking this to city council on Tuesday? Please?
Do you trust her to change that language?
Well, yeah, I mean, we could be sitting there Tuesday night, moving words around, but,
I'm gonna ask that it be.
but yeah, Kate, give it a try, give it a try.
It will not be an emergency, so if for some reason it needs a second reading, we can move this to city council for 3 readings.
I'll table it. About a year.
Good deal.
I just want to make sure I understand, front yard is halfway up the side yard, correct?
anything,
No.
how are we on the second page, on the front yard that you just referenced, R1, R5? That above 8 feet, how far?
Okay, so what I'm gonna draw you an example here of two properties.
There you go.
You'll see this. The reason there's two is because there's gonna be a traditional house that takes frontage on a street, and there's gonna be one that takes frontage on two streets. So I'm gonna draw this very quickly and pass it down to you.
We should have a third lot there, so that we know it's not. I'm messing with you. So the answer, I think it's the front edge of the house is the.
Okay, because I was looking, where on that, what do we mean by?
And then the
front?
two front yard concept is they can denote one as the
Yes.
side, yeah.
Yeah. But not front.
Correct. It's along the front edge of the house, so the construction of the house.
Right.
I think is the answer.
That was my question.
That's how the zoning code identifies yards for the purposes of fencing. Now, for other zoning purposes, the side yard actually bumped back to the back of the house, but we made that provision because sometimes people have a man door on the side of their house, they want to let their dog out, or they want to screen an air conditioner or something.
Okay, thank you. Want to make sure I knew what I was voting on.
You gonna hang on to this, Brody, till next Tuesday?
Yeah, I was
We
gonna say.
need it again.
We need to enter this as like State's Exhibit A.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right,
the next
have at it.
is Connex boxes.
Mhm.
I have for you the current legislation as exists for accessory structures, buildings and structures, without the edits that we added. Because I thought you might want to, that might be a little easier for everybody. If they had a copy. So, Connex boxes are an interesting conversation. They are currently being used on properties throughout the city of Perrysburg as accessory structures that do not move. People put them down, and these, Connex is a brand name, these are
Shipping container.
shipping containers.
Yeah.
All those things that nobody can find right now that's,
The pods and.
but
What we
the
see on
things that go
Target.
on the back of trucks and that then go into, on the ships and move around, large shipping containers. Connex is just a brand name for some of those. They are currently being used as accessory structures in violation of our code 1250.48A2 because they don't have the correct materials on the outside that we require for a shed or an outhouse. A second accessory structure on a piece of property. They don't look good. They're not particularly logical in the sense that if you're going to store things, I think the argument, I'll probably take over.
Yeah, so there's really two things that I wanted to add to what Kate's saying is, number one, in residentially zoned properties. So, Tim, you live in the store district, but Corey, for example, if Corey wanted to get on and purchase a shipping container
Mhm.
from a website online, he can do that, and he could have that dropped off in his backyard. He could use that as a shed, because the zoning code does not regulate building materials for residential purposes. Luckily, we haven't had anybody do that yet. But the thing about the shipping containers are, per square foot of storage space or cubic foot of storage space, they're a very, very inexpensive option. So that's traditionally why you see them. People can jam pack them, and for their size, they're relatively inexpensive. So that's why these businesses are doing that, because rather than go through a site plan process, a proper process through the planning commission, digging footers and foundations, putting up a building that meets our building material requirements, they're calling 1-800 numbers and having a truck come up and drop it off like a roll-off dumpster. And sometimes they're in great condition, Other times they're beat up and rusty and, that sort of thing. Or they have trade names for Chinese shipping companies stenciled on the side of them. So our goal is to make sure that they don't pop up in residential areas because we don't think that's going to be well received and meet the quality of the community that we're looking for.
That's our first goal.
And number two is to get people in compliance so that they're not using these as a cheap alternative to the proper infrastructure they should have to run their business. If they outgrow their space, they're not adding onto their building. They're simply throwing one of these out back, keeping hamburger buns and spare clothing and miscellaneous supplies out there rather than actually build on properly to their buildings or.
I get that, but I don't understand what we're changing. This is interesting, Kate. The existing ordinance
Does not have subsection H in it.
doesn't have H in it?
No. If you look at the existing ordinance, I'm sorry, it does have subsection H. It does not specifically lay out the highlighted area, making it clear to everybody that shipping containers are prohibited accessory structures.
Well, no, it says affirmatively, the current ordinance, they're allowed anywhere, residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, but the duration is limited very severely. The old one says that, and the new one does as well. I'm just trying to understand. I get the reason we're thinking about regulating these, but I'm not tracking what the changes are we're making. And
Yeah, you've seen it as we already covered.
yeah, I mean, the stuff that showed as new is already in there.
So we want to make clear that if you look at the H, it says portable storage unit containers are permitted, blah, 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 subject to the following conditions. We want to make clear that we define that portable storage unit containers, including but not limited to Connex boxes, semi-trailers, shipping containers, that these are all considered portable storage unit containers.
Okay, that's fine.
Does that make sense? That's what we're
So you're
trying to
expanding
do.
the definition, basically.
No, we're clarifying the
Yeah,
definition.
just
Because if
make-
I were to expand it, then everybody gets grandfathered in. We are clarifying so that it is clear under the law what a portable storage unit container is and where and why it is prohibited.
Mhm. Well, no, the dimensions or size is the same. Yeah, you're right. So if you, as I'm thinking about this now, the principle, we're taking the existing ordinance, but we're just being more, like,
Clear.
we're giving more examples of what a portable storage is.
Yes. Because the argument is actually the reverse of what I started to say. Individuals will drop these shipping containers on their property, particularly their commercial property, and then tell us, well, it can't be moved, so it's not portable.
No.
So, in order to make clear that the city considers portable storage unit containers to be these shipping containers, which we always have, but to make it clear, we want to make that spelled out in the ordinance.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. So it's, yeah, okay.
Okay,
That's a
sorry, it
clever
took me a while to get there. It's been a while since we talked about this, I couldn't remember.
That's pretty clever, though. You have one dumped in your yard, and then you say, hey, that's not portable. I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah, move it.
But then,
We'll get all the guys in the planning and zoning division, law department, and everyone else to come on over and try and move it.
if it's not portable, then it would fall under our 1250.48A2,
Yep.
because you would have to comply with our walls and everything else. So you have to do it one way or the other. Either it's portable and you're violating the law already, or it's not portable and you don't have all the right stuff on the side. I got it, right, Brody?
So I think the intent is that we don't have these as features in the city. And
Beg your pardon?
that we don't have these features in the city is the intent.
The only question I had with is frequency, which is not changing the existing language, but are these used for like home construction and building construction at this point? Because when I saw Target, I thought it was kind of brilliant for what they're trying to do. And I would be surprised if you didn't see more of that with home construction where materials get dropped off in a pod, so they're readily available for when the construction. I just didn't know if It's probably a future conversation, to be honest with you, whether someone could get permitted for more than two.
Yeah, I've never seen them used for home construction. They usually just come up and drop trusses off and throw them in the muddy front
Right.
yard and stuff like that. But, building materials were being stolen or something like that, I can see where.
Yeah, I think you might
Slide
start
lumber
seeing
in
it for
there.
like Amazon when people are ordering all the vanities for their house or, finishing work. I could see it used because it will shelter it somewhat too.
I think people have used the actual pod brand, but shipping containers is kind of a different level. Like, at least there's a company that comes and transports the pods for you. Shipping containers are easy to get, but not necessarily easy to have somebody come back and haul away or move.
Bomb shelter in my backyard's made. Don't send your guys over.
On that, I may be repeating what Corey said, the frequency, no more than two of these are located on a specific property at one time. But you're right, Target, I think, had 4 or 5 of these.
Yeah.
For a limited period. I
So I just
assume
didn't
they're
know if you
gone
needed
by now, I
permitting
haven't
process.
checked, but I guess that's, when you say Target's on the city.
No, yeah.
So they could do it.
So I just didn't know if we should have unless a permit is obtained or something, language in there, but I think we're having a conversation that doesn't even need to necessarily happen at this point. We haven't had troubles with
Yeah, I mean, for example, if Kroger, I call it the new Kroger, it's not really that new anymore, but on Carronade Drive, if they were gonna go through a remodel, for example, like, that's what they're there at Target for. They're going through a remodel, so they're stocking shelving units and things until they can bring those in and store them in the thing. If it's part of an active, like, remodel for a store, I don't have as much of a problem with that.
Yeah.
I understand that it's convenience necessary, that's short-lived, but we have people that, by all indications, plan on using these things forever. And they're not doing a special project, they're just, it's cheap and convenient to keep your stuff in one of these as opposed to having to be outside. So the way we used to do the pods, like the actual trade name pods that would show up, the portable on-demand storage, is we would allow that if it was used in conjunction with an active permit, a zoning permit and building permit from Wood County.
Yeah, that's what you say here. You let that continue until that project's complete, but then it's got to go away.
Correct, yeah. So,
Okay.
Yeah, because typically 60 days would not be enough for a major remodel.
No,
correct.
it wouldn't be in my house. We do it once a year. Feel like the guy moves in with us. All right, well, I don't know if you'll have this ready to go Tuesday.
I can, but if you want me to hold off until February, that's not that.
Well, if you could,
Yeah, and then
maybe
you can think about it.
if we can get one that's redlined against the current ordinance,
It's right in front of you.
what big part?
It's right in front of you.
Well, this one is not redlined against the current ordinance. Some of it shows as new that's already in there.
This is all new language.
Yeah.
This is coming out.
This is all bold though, like it's
They're
new.
all-
They're highlighted. So I assume
I
this is,
highlighted because I redid the A, B, C, I think.
Because you saw your calculator, same with those big numbers. Want to make sure that yellow.
oh, she changed 1 to A.
So it was, one became A,
All right.
this is red line, and then these are renumbered as well. And it's only bolded because I wanted you to know what section we were talking about. We were talking about
Okay,
H.
that's what threw me off.
Sorry,
I thought,
no, the yellow means it's new, or it's a renumber or relettering.
okay.
I mean, in a normal person's world, the code would not go little a, big number, large letter, which makes my OCD twitch every
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
But I can't figure out how to fix that.
okay,
so,
I got you. But then this was stricken out,
Yes,
but it's, why is it stricken out? Because it's the same thing as the thing right
because it
above.
was the same thing as the thing right above it, and we weren't sure why it was there twice, so we were taking it out the second time.
Oh. Okay.
You wanted to make sure they understood time.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, the 15, okay, well, I guess because that's also, you collapsed it into any property. Because the old thing, it said it twice, but the first paragraph dealt with single-family, multifamily, residentially zoned. The second paragraph said commercial, industrial, or institutional. But that's strange, we had 2 different sections, but it was the same duration for either one.
Yes, which didn't make any sense to us.
Okay. I see, so you just collapsed it all into one. Okay, all right, I get it then.
But I'm happy to give you, I mean, this is the first time this has been explained, because it got kicked a couple of times. If you guys want to, we can look at it again in February.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Okay.
At some point, I'm gonna start asking about what the penalties are again.
Oh, civil penalty.
I know, that's gonna be one of those projects after we get through arborvitae.
Yeah, once we
Maybe
get,
we'll talk about civil penalties.
we're not doing anything till arborvitae.
But this would be a clear example of where I think we need a civil fine. So if someone has a storage out there, we get a complaint, and it's been there for more than 15 days, we can start hitting them daily if they don't have a permit. I think that's gonna be the most effective tool rather than a misdemeanor.
All right, next, moving along to rezoning request. That's probably you, Brody, more than Kate. This is the one we had a public hearing on.
We haven't received any correspondence for or against it. It's situated right on State Route 25.
Yeah.
Doesn't appear to be anything abnormal. I don't know if there's any pending development option on it. I'm assuming this is just basically to allow it to be, the property to be more marketable. It's the same situation as the property next to Black Diamond, or the outlaw of Black Diamond. The office and service, which is fairly restrictive. We don't see office and service right on State Route 25, so my recommendation, the recommendation from the Planning Commission was to rezone it to C4.
Unanimous too.
Yes.
Yep, 6-0. I know, that looks pretty good to me. I don't know how you guys.
Looks good.
That's fine with me.
All right, so 3-0 to recommend approval of the council.
Just for your awareness, I received a phone call yesterday that folks that we dealt with, Josh from Simon CRE on the Black Diamond parcel, they got folks from Calendar Court all worked up. They had let their option expire after all of that.
Okay.
So I still say it was worth the effort because we now have a marketable piece of property for a decent purpose, but it won't be that purpose.
Okay.
So
Oh, boy.
I don't know if that's going to be good or bad for Calendar Court folks. But
Yeah, I mean,
in case you get questioned about it, what's
Okay.
happening with that development, they have let their option expire, and I got a call from a car wash, actually. And a car wash is not permitted there, so I had to tell them no, but we don't know who it'll be now, I guess it's fair to say.
And it's C3, right? That's what we ended on?
Yeah.
Okay.
In car wash is C4.
Yep.
yeah.
Make sure you visit Calendar Court and get your thank yous then, Barry.
Yeah.
If you kept that C3 out, they would have a car wash if we were open, I think. Not intentionally.
All right, storage of recreational equipment or trailers. I had, this is in that email exchange, Brody, I forgot, it was the gentleman, was it you, sir, who had a neighbor? Okay. And I remember he had those photos, he's got someone parked 2 or 3 doors down.
Actually, one house over.
There's one, okay, and parking him in his driveway. And I mean, the fellow was a reasonable guy who just said, we do anything about this. But, I mean, I guess the options are to, well, again, one option is to do nothing. I mean, it seems like we've talked about this about 10 times in recent memory. You could shorten the period of time they can store it in the front yard, or side yard for that matter.
And it's important to let you guys know that we have, I mean, like the Heights issue, we have people on both sides of this issue.
No, sure.
We have people that are saying, never under any situation should you be bringing home a 30-foot motorhome and parking in your driveway for a day or for 6 months. We have people that have small utility trailers or enclosed trailers, maybe they're a cabinet maker, maybe they, keep a snowmobile in it, whatever the case is, and they're saying, I own the property, I ought to be allowed to keep this here as long as I want to. We have somebody right now who called and they're in violation and said, I will not be moving this. So both of them feel like their points are valid in this. This is, we currently allow it for a certain, I'll call it a season. It's arguably more than a season. It's, what is it, 7 months or something like that.
Yeah, April 1 to October 31.
This is tough. I know in my subdivision, there's an RV 30, I mean, it's as big of an RV as you could possibly get, but I don't notice it because of the way the neighborhood's set up. But
They have an HOA that does not allow that.
Correct, and so like, I'm looking at this, and this would be, to me, it's an HOA kind of issue rather than a city thing. Which I know we got emails about another issue, HOA.
And those HOAs are notoriously underperforming, but.
And a lot of them don't even exist.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, because a lot of conservatives, until they don't want, like something in their neighborhood. You know, they don't want the HOA until they want the HOA, right?
So there's a problem. I don't know, I recognize exactly what Brody said, that gentleman and his wife were here, and it wasn't a good thing to look at. I remember they had talked to the neighbor, and the neighbor told them, I'm not moving it. But we have other people too who say, you know, I was thinking initially can they put it out there as of April 1st? But some people are gonna be saying, yeah, it's April 1 about, I'm out on the road.
It's one of those, should there be, I think, when I'm reducing this to a question that we should ask ourselves. One, I think I wanted to regulate whether someone could park it in the backyard, which I thought was a possibility from that conversation, that if they had a pad of concrete, they could just park out back, which I do not think should be allowed. But I think if I were gonna consider regulating this somewhat, it would be that it can't be continuously parked for a period of like 21 days, where they're just parking it there, they're not using it, they're skipping on their storage costs. Because I don't want to inhibit the people that want to use the recreational vehicle every weekend from parking in their driveway, so they don't have to.
But how you can enforce that?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's another thing.
Mark go out there every day and check the tires.
Which you're not allowed to chalk the tires.
That's right, that's not allowed.
So I don't know. And then is there even a goal there? So that's kind of how I.
I mean, we kind of lateraled it to the planning commission to see, I mean, just to see if anyone could rule up a different approach.
But, and I guess the only thing I really accomplished from the planning commission was to find out if they were receptive to reviewing it, and they said, we're open to reviewing a proposal. They didn't. Their proposals ranged from allowing it all the time. They're like, we already allow it for 7 months out of the year, what the heck's the other 5? You know, what's the big deal if we're going that far? And other people said, there are other opportunities for people to be able to store things. They mentioned 795, out by Bass Pro, there's self-storage lots around that are specifically in business to serve that need. And that it's a financial question. You know, you have to pay a monthly fee for storage or whatever the case is. So they're saying this isn't something that prevents somebody from having a motorhome or a boat or whatever. It's just there's a cost involved to owning that. And part of that cost is storage in the appropriate place. And that it shouldn't be allowed to be parked in driveways, you know, overnight or more than taking it and loading it and getting it out of there. So again, it's all over the board. So I don't know that I was able to give you any clear direction from the planning commission.
Well, and you know, the ordinance addresses quote unquote recreational equipment or trailer. Was it you or Corey who mentioned someone who's got a business and they park a large size vehicle? I don't even know if this is them.
Well, it does, so.
The code defines it.
Yeah, there's, it's under trailer, right?
Yeah, so the recreational equipment and recreational trailers, so the way the code defines it, it breaks down utility trailers, like it literally subdivides every type of trailer into these categories, and then it explains like there are a couple of particular vehicles that are excluded. They're similar to almost like food trucks, like smaller ones, not the super large ones, but it's a size limit in there, and then there's also another one that talks about low capacity. So for vehicles, so it kind of breaks it across a few different sections. But unfortunately, like those utility trailers are still encompassed under recreational vehicles.
Really?
So for a small business, yes.
By definition.
By definition, and it purposely the way that it's defined, it specifically says recreational vehicles and equipment, and they have a definition for both.
For example, we have somebody at the east-south boundary, not far from the junior high. I believe he's a cabinet maker, and he has I'm gonna say it's a Hallmark trailer. It's like an 8 foot long and maybe 6 foot wide enclosed trailer that he parks there. We notify him that he's in violation. And we said, this is under review currently. We said, we're gonna hold off until whatever conclusion this is. I said, then you have to comply with whatever's decided.
Oh, because he's got it out there now. It's in the winter season, not the summer season. And a guy like him probably can't park that in his rear yard. He's on the south boundary, he'd have to
He doesn't
have it
have,
on the side of his house.
he's too tall for his garage. He doesn't have enough room to get it around the side of the garage. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's another issue, I guess we'll deal with it this short time. I know, I'm not inclined to touch it. It seems like we touched this time and time again where when you respond to someone who has a specific complaint, I remember the change we made on the rear yard where I think you guys came to us and showed us examples where people were putting the stuff in the rear yard in a bunch of mud. And we didn't change that because we had some people who said, I can't afford or I don't have the room to build an impervious surface, and we let that go.
The idea that we had when this came through originally was that we didn't necessarily want to see people parking in their rear yard, but we said, at the very least, they shouldn't sink down in the mud. And we actually see a lot of people that have boats and campers you wouldn't want to stay the night in, and boats you wouldn't want to go in the water in, and that will probably never be in that condition to be worthy again. But they can't get rid of them, so they just park them in the rear yard. So we thought, if they were required to make an investment of a concrete pad, that may be a deterrent as to whether or not somebody keeps something. Or, if you have to give a little extra effort, it might make you question, do I really need this boat that I may or may not use? But as of right now, they can park them in the rear yard on grass, mud, stone, whatever.
You had one or two examples where you showed it looked awful. But we didn't deal with that, but as far as the problem that fellow was having and his wife, I don't know. I mean, if we fix their problem, the next door neighbor then is in here saying he has a problem. I'm not bothering anybody.
The only thing that I can offer to that is we're the only mechanism that can fix the gentleman who came in here, solve his problem. The guy who would then, if we fixed his problem, the neighbor that has the camper, he could fix his own problem, because like I said, there are self-storage places around who pay a fee. So he does have an option. It's not in his financial best interest, but he does have an option. But
Yeah, but I could see people that use those quite frequently, and he'd say, look, we head out every weekend, and we don't want to, have to drive a car over to a self-storage unit, grab our vehicle, and, we don't want to leave our car there, I don't know, whatever. We're in and out of that recreational vehicle quite frequently. So we can keep it by our house, just like anyone want to keep their car there, so. I don't know, we can't come up with stuff like you can locate it anywhere that doesn't interfere with the sight line of the neighbor. I mean, you can get some real weird dimensional things, but I just.
There'd be a true screen, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
a structural screen, we found out what that is.
Maybe we should just keep RVs as defined under the front yard fence.
Yeah.
So, and Tim, at some point, we can just over legislate, and I mean, this is designed to create limitations.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be a good neighbor.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, we can't, you're right.
So-
We can't legislate good manners.
No.
Of course, we hear that from State Farm.
I had to throw that in there.
Oh. Oh.
He walked into that one.
We're gonna be saying that stuff. You should have Aaron Rodgers. Isn't he a State Farm guy?
Yeah.
We're in trouble over him, though.
If I put on a Packer jersey, I can be a doppelganger for you.
You're not gonna be able to call up the bus.
Well, no, I'm not growing my hair out either.
All right, that brings us to the end of our official business. Any other business for the good of the order? All right, we're adjourned.
By the way. This.
So